So today we're going to jump into the topic of spiritual awakening, or more importantly, the hardest part of waking up, whether that be spiritual awakening or, you're waking up to a new way of living, chasing a purpose. I'll just try to break out of, old patterns that have been dictating and running your life, but the thing about it is not everybody close to you will get it. Okay. Not initially anyway. And that does hurt, right? It did for me because, see, deep down, we want, approval or validation from our family. We want them to understand, that we're changing, why we're changing, why we're choosing a different path. But sometimes, in my experience, they just don't get it, right? And see where I made the mistake. If you're not careful, that need for approval, it can actually keep you stuck, right? You start to play small. So I was doubting myself. I wasn't really going all out on what I wanted to do. And you start wondering, am I right? Am I wrong? Right? Because, and I battled that for the longest time. And see if you're feeling this right now, right? The reason I'm doing this is because I want to help you break free of that loop. And it's time to step into who you were born to be, who you came here to be. Right, but before we get into the meat of this, there's a reason why, that we seek our family's approval, and it's really hardwired into us. And that's from the moment we're born. And this goes back to, caveman times, if there was even caveman times, but it goes back to tribal times, right? Because we had to be accepted by our tribe just to survive. And in our tribe now is our parents, our siblings, our wife, the people closest to us. So their approval literally means survival. So when you start changing, when you start questioning, reality, the way that things are, the way that you've lived your life, the choices that you've always made, when you start pulling away from who you've always been in the past, who they've always known, right? It doesn't just feel uncomfortable. It can actually be pretty scary, right? And for me, especially because I've had an issue with rejection my whole life. And it was, what if they reject me, right? What if they don't love this new version of me? And this wasn't me consciously thinking it. These were just, unconscious feelings, or feelings that I was, were going on within me. And I felt it really, especially at the early awakening, okay? Because before that, my identity, I was crazy, right? I was, addiction. I was constantly chasing approval, shiny object syndrome, you know, a chameleon wearing different masks. And the angry guy, the happy guy, the Jekyll and Hyde, and my family knew that version of me, right? The guy who would drink far too much, party too hard, was always the loudest in the room. What was this? They say he was always the life and soul of the party, right? So when I started to show up and get sobriety, and I started to meditate and journaling and talking about spirituality, right? They didn't know what to do with that, and honestly, neither did I, right? So their doubt, their kind of questioning, their skepticism, it felt like rejection. And that was a tough thing for me because I'm thinking I'm doing all this good, right? I'm, being a better person, doing this, that, and the next thing, and they're not accepting it, right? But it's deeper than that, right? Because you can't fully step into your power if you are waiting for permission from other people, right? Because these other people, they are not meant to understand your path. Your path is your path for you. So the longer you wait for approval, the longer you're going to stay explaining yourself instead of stepping into that truth. And that's what it was for me, right? And that was the shift that really helped me. And even I still battle with this now with my wife, with the stuff I talk about, because she's still not fully on board. But you know what? That's cool. It's her journey, right? And I realize my purpose is not up for debate. It's not a group discussion. My calling was given to me, nobody else, right? It was placed in my heart for a reason. Right, so expecting people who haven't had my experiences, who haven't felt my pain, who haven't walked the road, and don't get me wrong, my wife has been there with me, and I'm not just talking about my wife here, I'm just talking about my family in general. But when I'm in that, and I'm explaining to you, so if you've been down that road and people haven't lived your experiences, they haven't felt the pain that you've went through or the obstacles that you've had to overcome, the road that you've walked, you can't expect them to fully understand why you're making the choices that you're making. And, it's like trying to explain colours to someone who's only ever seen black and white. And I know for me, right, my family couldn't understand, especially when I had a successful barber shop, right? They couldn't understand why I would walk away from that when it was once a big dream of mine, right? Or, with the sobriety, they could understand that because I'd caused so much chaos in my life with the alcohol. But it was all the other things, I stopped lying, I totally, after my spiritual awakening, I totally transformed as an individual. And it's hard to put into words. But then spirituality became my everything. Why did it matter so much to me? Their thinking. And my wife, she got the brunt of it, the most of it. But I realised they didn't have to understand. Right? Their belief in me wasn't required for me to keep going, or the belief in what I was experiencing, what I was going through. And neither is yours, you don't have to believe what I'm saying, but I'm making this video to help you understand that in the early part, there will be struggles. And their beliefs don't determine your worth. Their approval isn't evidence that you're on the right path. And let me emphasize that, right? It's okay if your family don't understand what's going on with you right now, right? And let me actually, I'll give you, this is me, kind of speaking from my past experience here, right? And I want to share something which is deeply personal, and I haven't really went into too much about it, but this is to give you an understand of what I was dealing with, right? Because I don't know if you'll hear a lot of people talking about, this part of their spiritual awakening, but for me, even right now, I feel hesitant about discussing it, right? But when I first had my spiritual awakening, right, it wasn't some gentle thing. It was profound. It was a super wild experience. And honestly, if you'd have told, me this was happening to me, I would have laughed because I used to believe it was woo-woo bullshit, right? I didn't believe in any. I was the biggest skeptic ever. But when I had my spiritual awakening, it was so profound, it was so overwhelming that I couldn't deny that something had happened, right? I was crying, I'd seen visions, I'd heard, voices. It was just crazy, right? And that was the thing that opened up the gates. And then sometime after that, I had a channeled message from Archangel Michael, right? And I was so taken back at the time. And even now, looking back, it does sound crazy, right? And especially when I didn't believe any of this. I didn't grow up talking about spirit guides and archangels. I thought it was all fantasy and just a lot of crap, right? But when I had this channeled message with Archangel Michael, and he'd said to me, I don't remember the exact words, but it was everything that you've been through, has been for a reason. It's preparation for what's to come, right? And he said, I think it was and you are chosen. And even when I say these words, I still don't feel right saying it because I don't believe I'm better than anyone. And chosen for what? I don't know what he meant by that, right? And I still don't fully know because I'm not meant to know right now. But hearing those words, it was such a relief because deep down, I'd always felt different. I'd always felt like I was here for something different. And when I was about 22, I had this moment where I had this realization, or it was my first ever download. And I felt this knowing that I was here for something different, right? Something important. And when I shared this with someone close to me, someone I truly trusted and I still do love very deeply, they laughed and dismissed it, but not in a bad way because how can you expect people to comprehend that? They just dismissed it. So I felt I don't know if I felt hurt. It was so long ago, but I know that I suppressed it. I shut it down. Right. So but this brought that back, and now here, all these years later, receiving this channeled message, and then also that was just one of many channeled messages I've had, right, from guides, from from other archangels, and other spiritual experiences. Having these undeniable things happen to me, which literally stopped my addiction in its tracks overnight. Right, so I was super excited because this was like, I couldn't believe it at first, right? And I thought my family would be fully on board, so I was excited to tell them. I thought they'd be proud. I thought they'd feel that magic too. But that wasn't the case, right? I was met with skepticism, doubt, concern, maybe that I lost my mind. And at the time it hurt, but really, could you blame them? Right? But could you blame them for knowing me all these years, being this crazy party animal, drugs, alcohol, prison, all this? So could you blame them that they would be skeptic about this? Because when you're going through something that's so life changing, when you're waking up to this whole new reality, this new world, I wanted to tell people that I loved. I wanted to tell the ones that I loved the most so that they could understand, that they could come with me. And you want them to see it, you want them to feel it, you want them to believe it, but sometimes they just don't. And no matter how many things that I've shared with them, things that have actually came true, things that I've received through guidance, which, in no way could be a coincidence. There's just no way it could have been a coincidence that these things that I've shared with them that have came true, and yet there was still this dismissal. Like maybe it was just coincidence, and I'm thinking, there's no way it could possibly be. So for a long time, I wrestled with this. I felt like I had to prove it. Like, I could just explain it the right way, then they'd finally believe me, they'd finally understand. But what I learned was the awakening is personal. It's yours. It's not my job or your job to convince anyone. And their lack of understanding doesn't mean that they love you any less. It doesn't mean that you love them any less either. And for me, I can now hold space because I understand that they're on their own journey. And my job isn't to wake them up. They have to wake up on their own. So I don't push anything on them, my experiences. I don't do any of that. I just stay true to mine, and I enjoy the process of what I'm going through. And see, when I really allowed myself to do that, it actually helped me love them deeper, to respect their process, because theirs is different, right? Theirs looks nothing like mine, but they're on their own process. And that's the truth. Everybody's on their own awakening journey. And some people don't believe it. That's cool, because that's the stage that they're at. Some people are getting closer. Some people won't see, the vision that you've got for this life until it's real. Even what I'm doing right now, I haven't really even spoke to my wife about YouTube because, you know, she doesn't see what I see. So I just want to create it. And then when it's, got to a place where, I can show her and say, look what I've created, this community of amazing people. Right? Some people won't understand your calling. That's cool, because it's not theirs, it's yours. It's given to you. So that's okay. Right? And it's not about chasing approval. And that's what I done for the longest time. And the biggest mistakes that I made was, chasing approval, right? Because we confuse connection with approval. We think that if they really love me, then they'll agree with my choices or they'll fully believe. But that's not love. That's needing permission. Real connection is like, I love you, even when we see things differently. I respect you, and I still want to share my life with you. Right? That's what connection sounds like. Approval's more like, I need you to agree with me so I can feel okay about myself. And I've done that for so long. And one's rooted in love and the other is rooted in fear. Right? And the moment I stopped needing, the approval from my family to agree with me, and I started loving them where they're at, right, without making myself small, that's when, more things opened up for me. Right? Because I can respect your opinion, even if you don't understand my choices. I love you, but I will not shrink back into who I was just to keep the peace, just to make other people happy. And honestly, it's caused some friction between my wife and I because, we've got young children, and this whole spirituality stuff and the guides, that's foreign to a lot of people. And when I'm talking about it on YouTube and I'm openly sharing about it, she's scared in case people will then make fun of my kids, which I can understand. But you know what? I'm not going to shrink. I'm teaching my children to follow their dreams, to be who they want to be, regardless of what anybody else says. Do what they feel called to do. And how can I tell them that if I'm not doing that myself? So I will not bow down. I will not shrink. I will not do anything for anyone. This is my purpose, my calling, and I'm following it because that might trigger other people. That's not my problem. And that's one of the hardest things to accept, is that your growth might make other people feel uncomfortable, right? Not because you're doing something wrong, but because your change forces them to confront the ways that they're staying the same. So when you rise up, you hold that mirror. And some people aren't ready to look in that mirror. You know, I have friends who doubted my sobriety, questioned my if I would stay on track, questioned selling my business, rolled their eyes when I would talk about spirituality. People who are truly close to me. And at the beginning it really hurt me. But over time I realised they weren't really doubting me. They're just defending their comfort zones. And that's not my burden to carry, and it's not your burden either. Okay, love them. Let them be wrong about you. And this is something that I really want you to listen to and take in here. You can love your family deeply and still let them be wrong about you. You don't need their understanding to keep walking your path. You don't need their agreement to continue to grow and flourish and step into your true nature and purpose. You don't need their approval to be who you're meant to be. You are here. If you're watching this right now, right, and you've got this far, you're here for a reason. You're chosen, and I believe that we're all chosen for something. But some are different from others, and some are not meant to fully, awaken into, or they won't answer the call. But we're all called to do something great, and it's about stepping in to what you feel aligned. Answering the call, waking up. And if people doubt you, let them doubt you. Just love them anyway. And like that's what I say. I don't care. I just love everybody. And I will not judge, because when I'm judging others, I'm judging myself. Right? And I will let people, say whatever they want to say I'm crazy, this, that, and the next thing. I'm cool. I still love them. Right? It's about staying true to yourself, even when others question your path. Right? And how do you do that? Right? You stop trying to convince people. Stop taking things personally. That's what I took things so personally. Right? Stop letting other people's fears become yours. Right? When I really done that, I started to lead by example. And I had to learn the hard way, because, you know, you can't talk someone into understanding your journey. And as I've just spoke about it, you can show them. And I had to show my wife, my children, the people around me, by consistently, taking the actions. Because when I first got sober, nobody knew I was going to stay sober, because I'd got brief parts of sobriety in the past. So they were maybe thinking it's only a matter of time before he screws up again, because that was the past pattern. And even though I had this spiritual awakening, they didn't know. They knew, but they didn't believe it all. So when I first got sober and started changing my life, they were still in fear and doubt. And I wanted so bad for them to see how serious I was. Right? I thought if I just explained it the right way, I told them the books I was reading, the courses I was taking, the inner work that I was doing, the spiritual breakthroughs I was having, they'd believe me. They'd get on board. They'd finally support me the way that I needed. But it didn't work like that. The more I try to convince them, the more they kind of push back. And sometimes even avoid the conversation altogether. And this is why I had to shift, not with my words, with my actions. I had to let them see me show up differently every single day, sober, present, focused, calm, being honest with myself and others around me, staying committed, even when no one's clapping for me, even when I wasn't getting the acknowledgement that I desperately craved. Right? Months went past, the one day after the other, it just went past. And it was a conversation I had with my mum. And she said to me, she said, you know, and my mum always, we have such a close bond and a close relationship. And she knows by talking to me and looking at me what place I'm in. And she just said, son, you seem different. You just seem more at peace. I can see it in you. And it's emotional. And, and at that moment, it was like, that moment hit me harder than even now, any conversation I've ever tried to force, because it wasn't about my explanations. It was about me truly embodying the man that I was desperate to become. And your growth will speak louder than words could ever, right? Your transformation, let that do the talking and forget about the words. Okay. And when it comes to, you might have to set some boundaries. You don't have to engage in every argument or debate. And like I used to always have to be right. I always had to be in arguments. I always had to win them But now I don't. When things get heated, I'm just like, cool, I hear you, right? But that doesn't feel right for me. End of story. I walk away. I don't get myself involved in these situations where I used to put so much pressure on, or so much emphasis of winning, of being right, or this, that, and the next thing. I really don't care. Okay. And one of the great things about being on this journey was, for so long I felt alone, because not everyone is meant to come with you to this next chapter. People will fall away, right? People who are not meant to be on this next, mission with you or whatever. People will fall away, people will leave, people will, go and do their own thing. But then what that's doing is, when the people leave, it's making way for new people to come in, right? New relationships, new people who are aligned, new opportunities, right? People who are meant to be on your path for this next chapter. And that is when you start to connect with people who understand you, who believe you, who have similar experiences. And when you can have these deep conversations without fear and judgment and skepticism, it's truly magical, because you can share something so deep with another human that so many people don't understand. But you will never know that unless you speak up, or step into your purpose, because how will other people know what you're going through? And this is where it's a double-edged sword. Do I speak about it, or do I hold it into myself? And for me, I'm done holding things. I'm speaking openly. That's why I've created this channel, to create a community of loving, caring, kind individuals to rise up together, right? And, in spiritual awakening, it can be portrayed as being rainbows and butterflies and unicorns and cloud nine and all that. And don't get me wrong, for some of it, it was like that. I was on cloud nine, but a lot of it felt heavy. Okay, and I know some, especially when it comes to this conversation I'm talking about today about families, it can be a lonely road. Okay, where people that you love the most can't see what you see. Okay, when they look at you like you've just lost the plot, right? But really, what's happening is you're finally finding out who you truly are and the potential that you possess. Okay, so let me tell you something. Right, I wish somebody had told me this, early on in my journey. And this is the thing, I had to learn so many lessons on my own. But I believe, again, this is all part of the plan for what Archangel Michael told me, for what's to come. You're not put in this earth to play small, right? Just so other people can feel comfortable. You're born to be great. You're not born to repeat the same cycles, carry the same wounds, or keep wearing the same old mask just so no one else gets upset. You're here to rise, to step into your power. Right? You are here for a reason. You are here for a purpose, especially if you've got this far into this video, right? You're here to lead, not by forcing, not by convincing, but just by embodying the individual you came here to be. Not everyone will get you. Not everyone will come with you. Some will resist. Some will, call you crazy. Will call you a liar. Some will leave. But the right ones, the ones who are meant to be part of your life, they will know and feel your truth. Okay? So whether your family gets it or not, whether they ever understand your journey or not, you can still love them wholeheartedly. You can still show up with compassion, but you no longer have to shrink yourself to keep their love. Because the truth is, the individual you're becoming doesn't need permission to rise and stand tall. They just need the courage to keep walking the path and share openly and step into the truth. Because believe you me, this world is awakening, and the minority will soon be the majority, right? People are waking up every single day, and I would love to hear from you. Are you going through something like this right now? Have you went through a spiritual awakening? Are you feeling the tension between staying true to your growth and wanting your family to understand? Drop a comment. Let's share experiences. I read every single comment, right? Because I know how difficult this journey can be, and I was alone for so long, for most of it. And I do not want you to be alone. I want you to know that I'm here. I've got your back. Okay, and if this message hits home, and if you've felt yourself in this story, please join me on this journey. Subscribe, join me so we can stay connected. Right, I've got so much more that I want to share, and I want others to feel the strength so that they can step in to their path. Okay, especially when you're in that place you feel alone and no one gets you. I want to know that I get you. Okay, I want to know that you do not need to grow alone. We can rise together. Okay, and that's me for today. I hope you've got something from this. I'll have another video here, and you can subscribe here. Truly love you guys. Have a great day.